This is TWiT.
Amina, I wanted to kind of start out our discussion and frame our discussion today with your post from October to Medium, bringing broadband to the unconnected, that you wrote in your capacity as a Mozilla Tech Policy Fellow. It really sort of sets the stage for government policies in this area and will help, I think, bring some context to the specific things we're going to talk about in a few minutes on later in the show. Here you're giving the example, a very positive and hopeful example of the town of Beatty, Nevada. Am I saying that right? Beatty?
Beatty.
Beatty, Nevada. Can you tell us what's going on there?
So in Beatty, Nevada, they've actually worked with the local rural electric co-op to bring fiber to a 1,000-person town. And this is just over the border from Death Valley. It's a really rural area. And so for the students and the residents of that town, it means that they're going to be connected to high-speed internet and be able to do distance learning and have access to all the benefits that broadband brings. So it's a really exciting story because oftentimes these types of places are left unconnected. Providers find it too expensive to participate in those communities. So this is in fact a really hopeful story to see how a community found a way to connect themselves.
Right. And so what did Beatty, Nevada have to do? Who did they partner with and how did they connect themselves to broadband in this way?
Well, it takes all hands. There's a governor in the state that's very pro broadband. There is community members that have been very pro broadband as well. I think it's good to point out that it takes not just like the interest of the local government, but it also takes a willingness to partner with the folks that you need to partner with. Oftentimes, communities ask their sort of biggest provider in town. And if that provider hasn't already started providing broadband service to your community, they probably have a reason as why they haven't already done it. And convincing them to do so may be pretty difficult. You know, it could come as easily as in the form of like some reduced regulations or some more favorable tax benefits. But sometimes there's very little that towns can do to get that biggest provider involved. And it takes a more local provider, somebody with some skin in the game. So they actually partnered with Valley Electric, which is a rural electric co-op. And if that sounds like it's a similar story, it's because electricity went through the same thing. When we were working on rural electrification, what we often found was that these communities were going to be served by the small businesses, the small rural electric co-ops that are going to be reaching out to these small communities and putting kind of their skin in the game to make sure that these communities are up and running. And it looks like they are taking up broadband as well. So Valley Electric actually partnered with some small telecom providers that are close to Las Vegas and is working to run fiber up sort of the highway corridor to Beatty and make sure that they're connected. And so it's not like a story of, oh, well, you just have to hand people a lot of money or depend on your biggest provider or, you can't trust any kind of industry. It's a story of people working together. But the number one thing that sort of comes out of it is a commitment to serving the community with the highest possible service. A lot of these communities often get left out with just, say, the easiest possible service. So rural communities are often connected by satellite because it takes less on the infrastructure side to be able to do that. That's incredibly expensive, and the quality of service is pretty low, and the usability at the end of the day is also pretty low. And sometimes, depending on what the terrain is like, it's just not a great option. So it was really interesting to see how committed everybody was to getting high quality service to this community.
Yeah, I loved your post, and I love this hopeful story of Beatty. But maybe you should describe for us what communities like Beatty and countless other communities throughout the U.S. Looked like before they were able to put together this kind of access. You touched on the satellite option. For those of us who don't have satellite internet service, we're probably familiar with it from seeing ads on TV for something like Usenet Gen 4 or Gen 5, I guess now they have now. What is that option like? It's you were just touching on saying it's very expensive and it's probably not as fast as you think it's going to be.
Right. Pricing really depends on where people are located. But it's often, at least double the cost of what somebody in a, major metropolitan area would experience, but the speeds are far lower. And I would say the quality of service is incredibly spotty because of the type of technology used. So weather and terrain can affect satellite service, which, in rural areas is often the case, that they have pretty severe weather or difficult terrain. So it's not a really great option. It's more like an option.
Right.
And then, otherwise you're trying to work off of maybe existing twisted pair like copper line, which, is, what we would know as dial-up or DSL service. And that's only if the service provider in your area has decided to upgrade and provide you with DSL access. It's unclear what kind of speeds you're going to get. So, hopefully you're getting something around 10 down, 1 up. But it may not be as fast as all that, which is not very fast at all.
Right.
Especially if you're talking about doing something like distance education, or you've got a small business that's really just not a reliable enough connection to really benefit from economically or educationally.
You've brought up distance education a couple of times. Is that because you're talking some of the time here about communities that don't have local education that their students will be attending, that they have to do distance education because they must be homeschooled because that's how rural the community is?
Well, usually what I'm referring to with distance education is like sort of the supplementary pieces that major metropolitan area schools have access to. So you've got more teachers, right? You've got teachers with more variety of backgrounds. You might be able to learn other languages. You might be able to do more robust STEM education, coding. It's just a matter of access to resources more than necessarily homeschooling.
I see.
Yeah. And in fact, I think if they're, for those who are homeschooling, most of them are utilizing resources through the internet. So for communities where homeschooling is, I think, more popular, access to the internet it's a very important component of homeschooling as well, in terms of making it a robust option.
Right. So education is one key area where people desperately need broadband access. We used to think of broadband as a luxury in other areas. Not you might not have a lot of sympathy for people who aren't able to, at the drop of a hat, stream every Netflix show at very high quality. But that too, does sort of put you in a different cultural situation than the rest of the country, to be sure. But we're not just talking about using the internet for entertainment anymore. The internet is so pivotal to just about every aspect of people's lives. Their healthcare, scheduling an appointment to get their car serviced. What am I leaving out, Amina?
Banking, insurance. Like access to government services, because especially in rural areas, there are limited hours and getting to an office in person is difficult, or in order to save from local government all the way up to the federal government, we're closing down offices. We're getting rid of paper documents. We're trying to get everyone to move online. So that means for folks who are more dependent on government services, who tend to be either low income or potentially who live in rural areas or tribal lands, or are part of difficult to reach communities where they might be non-English speakers, new Americans, immigrant populations. These access points these in-person access points are disappearing, and you have to go online. So government services, I think, is one that's incredibly important as well.